Kansas absolutely blows it. We found out they're not clutch today. They lose to Houston in double overtime as we recap KU Houston on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making LOJ your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're recapping KU falling 92-86 in double overtime in Allen Fieldhouse to the Houston Cougars, a game that Kansas had no business losing. They should have won that game twice. They end up falling, so we're going to recap what happened in the game, game awards, what is next for KU on this episode of the show, which is also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your next purchase. You can head on to the next home game against UCF on Tuesday night, as they'll now be looking to bounce back. Kansas falls in this one. They are now 5-3 on the season in Big 12 play. They already have 5 losses on the year. They're 3 games back of Houston, who has now beat them on their home floor. Kansas ain't winning the Big 12 title. Now, maybe we're kind of beyond that, but I think what we found out in this game is Kansas has a clutch problem. Kansas blew this game twice. Right? It'd be one thing if you blew it once and then you were able to secure it in the first overtime period where it's like, okay, you just had kind of weird things happen to you. The fact that you do it twice, right? What's the saying? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I don't know. That might be the wrong way of saying it. But point being, this was kind of that. And we've seen Kansas, maybe not be able to come through in the clutch maybe as often this past year or so, year or two, I would say, than maybe some of the previous year's teams. Maybe some of that was just catching up to them. I don't know, but you had no business losing this game, right? I mean, you should have won the game. You're up 6 in overtime with under a minute to go. You should have, they finished on a 6-0 run in the final 70 seconds or something like that in the regulation period as well. That just does not happen under past Bill Self teams, let alone in Allen Fieldhouse. Like, it's happened before on the road. It's happened before in the NCAA tournament. It does not happen in Allen Fieldhouse, and it absolutely did in this performance. Usually you go in Allen Fieldhouse, and it's a close game. It's that overtime game, and you're the team who like, okay, something good is going to happen for them. And it felt like the opposite in this one. It felt like at the end there was like, something's going to go wrong here. And, you think about DeJuan Harris missing the 2 free throws there in a game where at that point you felt like you were up 6. You felt like you had it in the bag. And even when DeJuan missed both free throws, it's like, okay, I still think they're going to be fine. But, now you start to think back to the resume for DeJuan Harris, who, I think has obviously done some great things in his time at Kansas. But, you think about the stepping out of the bounds play in the national championship that ended up, not mattering. But he has the 10-second call against Arkansas that changes that one. There have been some really bad clutch moments for DeJuan Harris in his time at Kansas. And obviously this was just much more than DeJuan Harris. DeJuan Harris, Rylan Griffen missed his free throws in the second overtime. AJ Storr missed both of his free throws in the second overtime. Zeke Mayo couldn't get the inbound pass in. It felt like Hunter Dickinson kind of disappeared from the game in the second half. There were a lot of things that were more than just DeJuan Harris of why they weren't clutch and why they blew the game. But I think it's infuriating because I think if you win this game, you feel so much better about where this team is at. And realistically, the fact that they lost this game doesn't change the fact that they did a lot of really good things. And I think big picture moving forward, I think you can actually come away from this game, big picture being yeah, man, they've been playing better basketball of late. They should have beat Houston. So theoretically, you can come away from this feeling a little bit better about this team. You can come away from this saying, hey, we got to see Rylan Griffen go off. He hit 5 threes. That was great to see. And if that leads to more playing time and more opportunity from Bill Self, that is a huge win moving forward. The way that Flory Badunga played, he was unbelievable for Kansas in this game. I thought he was the best player on the floor for both teams when he was out there. That is a huge positive moving forward for Kansas. And if that means he's playing more even when KJ comes back, that is a good thing for KU. So there are certain things you come away from this game. You scored pretty well. You shot 45% from the floor, 36% from 3. You couldn't make your free throws. You had 12 turnovers, which honestly is not that much against a Houston team that forces a bazillion turnovers. There are some real long-term positive outlooks that you can take away from this game and say, overall, big picture, you should feel better about the team, but you don't right now. You don't today, and you probably won't tomorrow because you should have won the game. You should have seen the positive result in the game. And so maybe the process, you feel a little bit better about where this team is at after the game, but you certainly don't feel good about how they lost this game and how they did not come out on top. And that is I guess if we are talking big picture, that is now a big picture scare, right? Does that not feel like a very logical way for this team to get upset in the first round or the second round of the NCAA tournament now, right? That you can't get an inbound pass in and you blow the game late, or you can't make free throws late and then the other team goes down and cans a shot. Those are things that happened in the NCAA tournament, and they showed themselves to be very prone to it in this Houston game. And so, there are just a lot of questions there, like, why are you missing all these free throws, right? It feels like this has been a thing for years with Kansas, that they just haven't been a good free throw shooting team. And even they bring in players who are like transfers from other schools who are good free throw shooters, and they still cannot make their free throws. Like, what is going on there? I don't know why you continue to have, I love Zeke Mayo, but it's like eventually after one of these 5-second calls, like maybe switch up who's having the inbound on one of these plays. It felt like to me Hunter Dickinson got kind of punked by Juwan Roberts in this game. And, Dickinson actually had a solid game, but like Juwan Roberts was doing everything for Houston to kind of grit through and win that game. And again, like Rylan, Griffen, and Flory, Badunga, those are two huge takeaways from this game and a positive for Kansas to come away from this. But you had no business. You should have won this game twice, right? And then once you got to the second overtime and you missed 2 free throws to start off, and they had a nice start to it, it felt like you were just kind of done, right? Flory fouls out at the beginning of the second overtime. It just felt like you were kind of done. And so, like I said earlier, Kansas is now sitting in a situation in the Big 12 where they are 5-3. They have 3 losses in the Big 12. Houston's now sitting in a situation where they are undefeated. They're 8-0, and they have a win at Kansas. You're 3 games back. There are also teams in front of you. Texas Tech is 5-2. Arizona and Iowa State are both 7-1. You obviously already lost at Iowa State as well. Baylor is also there at 5-3. There's too much carnage either next to you or in front of you that, like, kiss winning the Big 12 goodbye. At this point, and we've talked about this before, like, at the end of the day, with the way the conferences are, like, you care probably more about NCAA tournament seeding. The streak isn't alive anymore anyway, right? And that's what it'll come down to here for Kansas. But like, that is a very disappointing result for a team that was preseason number 1 in the AP poll to basically through 8 games of conference play, 12 more games of conference play to go. That in my eyes, I'm just like, no, they can't win the Big 12 now. And I get it. Like, mathematically, of course they can. But like, realistically, you look at the schedule for Houston and Iowa State down this, and it's like Kansas is going to lose more games, right? Whether it's losing in the clutch like this one or losing in a different way. But it's like, how many games are really all these teams going to lose down the stretch? It's like with Houston, okay, here's the remaining road games. At West Virginia, just got smoked by Kansas State. At Colorado, at Arizona State, at Texas Tech, at Baylor. How many of those they lose? Worst case, they lose what, 2, 3? No, let's say worst case, they lose 1 at home. So at worst, they're losing 4 games in Big 12 play. You confident Kansas is going to go, what would that be? Because it's a 20-game schedule now. Are you confident that Kansas would go 11-1 the rest of the way in the schedule? No. So, like, again, the big picture things are important, and it doesn't mean you have to win the Big 12 to go far in the NCAA tournament, but that is a result of this happening. And I think among all of KU's losses so far this season, right? You lost at Missouri, your hated rival, right? You lost the game against Creighton where you weren't ultra competitive. You lost the game at home against West Virginia where you just had a very poor showing in the first half, and it was very disappointing. And yet among all of those, maybe this is prisoner of the moment speaking, but because of the fact that you had an opportunity to get this huge win and probably have a huge momentum booster and get back in the Big 12 race, and you just let it slip through your fingertips by your own fruition, this feels like the most disappointing loss of the season because you couldn't handle it in the clutch. So we'll see where they go from here, because I think your next game is really going to be a gut check if you're Kansas. Like, where do you want to go from here as a team, right? You can bounce back from this and let this be the turning point of the season, or this can be the season, the moment of the season where there's been a lot of turmoil back and forth that kind of crushes you. So I'm curious to see how they respond from here. Let's get to game trophies. There were some positive performances. There were some obviously negative things that happened. Let's discuss that on the other side. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans is unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing the Chiefs-Bengals AFC Championship game a couple of years ago, and I got those tickets on Game Time. It was a memory that I'll never forget, and this year you can make those memories with Game Time. You can get tickets for the KU-UCF game I saw earlier that cheapest tickets are like $13. It's probably going to go down even more after the Houston loss. So create those unforgettable moments for yourself. You can even see the seat views from the app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Kansas Falls 9286. Don't forget you can check out Locked On College Basketball. I'm sure they'll have plenty to say on this game for your second listen every day. All right, we're going to get to our game trophies. Best moment. There were some fun moments in this game. I think the Rylan 3-ball on the first half, where it was like the third shot of the possession, they were getting all the offensive rebounds. They were, matching some of the physicality and toughness of Houston that leads to the three. I think that was a really cool moment. I think the bookend buckets by Flory Badunga was really cool. The one at the end of the first half, and then he starts the second half with a dunk. We'll get more on Flory here in a second. The Rylan Griffen 3 on what was a great pass by DeJuan Harris. Again, DeJuan was not clutch at the end. He's got to make those free throws. He had the 1-for-5 free throw game against Iowa State recently here too. But DeJuan did have 12 assists, at the very least, to just one turnover. And he does get credit for that against a Houston defense that typically forces a lot of turnovers. And he had that one great pass that was driving the baseline, jumps in the air, kicks to the corner. Rylan Griffen cans 3 and makes it 64-60. That was a cool moment. And then the Rylan Griffen 3 to make it 77-73 in overtime. It felt like that was going to be the game changer. Then you get a stop. It felt like that was going to be Kansas wins the game, and Rylan Griffen's 3 is the big moment that changes things. Unfortunately, our worst moments of the game, a lot to choose from here. The obvious ones are the end of game sequences. Let me give a couple other ones first. There was that missed dunk by Shaquille Moore where he heard the footsteps behind him. And that was part of the second half, the start of the second half, I should say, where Kansas was really bad at the start of the second half. Like, that's another area where if Kansas was just a little bit better at the start of the second half, maybe they don't even need some of this stuff at the end of the game. But yeah, that was poor. AJ Store's shot selection was rough for KU. And that was a problem for Kansas because you play a good Houston defense, you have to be disciplined on the offensive end. And, it feels like any momentum that AJ Store gained in the TCU game, you gave it all back and you didn't regain it in any way in this Houston game, which is certainly unfortunate there. I think the 5-second call where you had 2 timeouts and then the full final 70 seconds of regulation, like you could just kind of lump all of that together, right? Of just blowing that game in a real way at that point in time. And then the final sequence in overtime, that one feels even worse to me because you're up 6 with like 30 seconds left and you're shooting 2 free throws. All you have to do is one more thing right, or they have to do one more thing not perfect. You either need to make one of your 2 free throws, which it was not a 1-and-1, it was 2 free throws. You need to either make one of 2 free throws, so that's 2 opportunities, make a stop on their shot, right? Get the inbound pass in, then make one of 2 free throws, or theoretically, since they didn't get the inbound pass in, then make a stop. So they basically ended up with 4 things they needed to go against them. But realistically, if you get the inbound pass in, it would have been even more things. So just ultra infuriating. And yeah, that can't happen. You look at KenPom, and do you know who the number 1 team in the country is in Division I experience? It is the Kansas Jayhawks. They certainly have not played like it at times this year and did not play like it in the clutch of this game. And then also, the start of the second overtime where it's like, you have Rylan Griffen to the free throw line, typically a good free throw shooter. He misses both, and because he misses the second, it allows for a live ball rebound, foul on Flory Badunga, where he fouls out of the game, and he had been your best player to that point in time. So it's like, that was a really bad moment for you too, because that felt like, oh, now the wind is really out of your sails. The appalling stat of the game, it has to be the free throw shooting. Both teams shot horribly on free throws. Houston was 14 of 25, 56%. Kansas was 17 of 30, 57%. That was just very appalling from both ends of the court for KU. And that was very not good for KU. So I think that was certainly the most appalling stat of the game. I do want to give student section of the game, which goes to KU. Obviously, that would be your only choice here. Bill Self kind of called them out this week, and it was loud. KU did not lose that game because of the student section. They were there. They brought it, and that was really good stuff from them. What about offensive MVP for KU? So Rylan Griffen had 17 points. He had 5 3-pointers. He also had an assist. He had a really good drop-off pass to Flory Badunga. Flory was 7 of 10 from the floor. Also, Flory 5 of 7 at the free throw line. So, That's what, maybe going back to the appalling stat, that's even more appalling. Kansas was 17 of 30 at the line. It wasn't even like they did like a hack of Flory thing, who hasn't been a great free throw shooter up to this point. If you take out Flory Badunga's free throw shooting, which, again, on paper, Flory is one of your worst free throw shooters on the team. Kansas was 12 of 23 on free throws outside of Flory Badunga, but he was 5 of 7. And I just realized AJ Storr was 0 of 4. What the heck, man? Okay, but yeah, so Flory, 19 points, good efficiency, also had 3 offensive rebounds. He also had 2 assists. That one play where Flory had the wherewithal to pass it off to Hunter Dickinson for what ended up being an and one for Hunter was really impressive growth that we've seen from Flory, that he has a little bit more to his game here and there. Zeke Mayo had 16 points, but he also had 3 turnovers. He also, was the inbounder on those struggle plays. He also had a really bad minus 17, took him 17 shots. So I don't think it would be Zeke in this one, just 1 of 8 from 3. You could say Juwan Harris with the 12 assists to 1 turnover, given the opponent with Houston, but missing that layup in the second overtime, missing the 2 free throws. I don't think we can go there. Hunter had a decent game, 17 points, 6 of 11, 8 rebounds, only 1 on the offensive end of the court. I thought his struggles were more so when he had to guard Juwan Roberts. And maybe left a rebound here or there to get to. But overall, he was solid. But yeah, I think this has to be between Flory and Rylan Griffen. I am going to go Rylan Griffen because I think the 3-point shooting really opens things up. He was 5 of 6 from 3. The rest of Kansas was 4 of 19 from 3. If they did not have Rylan Griffen from 3, they're not even in that position to get to second overtime or to blow the game in regulation or in the first overtime. So Rylan Griffen, I'll give my offensive MVP. Defensive MVP, honestly, anybody not trying to stop Juwan Roberts, who had 24 points and just kept doing like the same move over and over again. Also Malik Wilson, KU could not stop him, and he's been like a very low point per game scorer this year for Houston so far this season. This is what's crazy though. Kansas had 0 blocks against Houston. How does that happen? You know what I mean? And it felt like Houston had a really good game shooting from the mid-range, probably better than they normally do, but like no blocks. Are you serious? Also, Kansas only had 4 steals. You forced Houston in a game that there were 2 overtimes, right? So you played 50 minutes of basketball. Houston only had 5 turnovers. That also is kind of unacceptable. And, you're not going to win many games where you're forcing a turnover every 10 minutes from the opposition. So I don't know who I really want to even go with here on the defensive side of the ball if you're KU. I guess LJ Cryer only had 9 points on 2 of 12 shooting. Like, that's a really good job by the Kansas defense. Emmanuel Sharp hit those key threes late in the game, but he was 2 for 8. So maybe the KU guards like Shaq Moore and DeJuan Harris and Zeke Mayo get a little bit of credit for the defensive end. Mayo also had 8 defensive rebounds, so maybe they would share that award here for KU. All right, doesn't feel any better after talking this out. But what's next for KU as they try to bounce back? We discussed that on the other side. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Man, I still can't believe KU lost that game. So KU now 5-3 on the season, 5 losses overall, 5-3 in Big 12 play. What is next for the Jayhawks? Well, they have UCF back at home, which last time they played UCF, it certainly was a good bounce back spot for KU, and they certainly did that. I'd imagine this one will be a little bit closer if you're setting the line at UCF plus like 50. I think UCF will play them a lot tougher this go around. And we can't even say that, like, okay, you have the Allen Fieldhouse magic there. Like, I don't know. This team has overcome the Allen Fieldhouse magic in a negative way by losing this game. And you've already lost 2 games at home. And the other one you lost in the clutch to West Virginia at home, too, where, you foul them late and then you have that weird shot at the end of the game. Yeah. Weird all the way around for KU at home in these close games. But UCF at home, you need to win this game. Like, at this point, we're just talking about Kansas NCAA tournament seeding. We're talking about Kansas just trying to be the best team they can to make a run in March, like those sorts of things, and, win this game so that you can try to maximize that seeding. And then you got a big one at Baylor, right? In theory, if you viewed it as maybe you were predicting the schedule before the season started and you said, okay, I think they'll beat Houston when they play them in Allen Fieldhouse, but I don't know, tough to win at Waco, right? Maybe you would have said between the Houston game at home and the Baylor game, go 1-1 and that'll be okay, right? So I guess in theory you have an opportunity if you go 2-0 this week with UCF and Baylor to at least get this one back a little bit. But the problem with how you lost this game, like, it's not just that you lost at home by like 6 points. It's like, oh, Houston was just a better team. You lost the game that you should have won, and you blew the game in a lot of different ways. So, like, even if you do win at Baylor and can look back and be like, okay, well, you stole one back, you're just going to be sitting there going, oh, but if they would have won. It's like with KU football. They won those 3 straight ranked games, and instead of it being, oh, you stole some back, it was, oh, could you imagine if they would have won one of their early games, and then they'd be going bowling right now, right? That's just kind of the nature of the beast. And so I do think, like, bottom line here, like I said, there are some positives you can take away. If Flory and Rylan Griffen play like that moving forward, it's going to be really hard to beat this Kansas team for a lot of other teams, right? It took Kansas absolutely crudding down their leg to lose this game based on the performances you got from those guys. And so if you continue to get those types of performances, it's going to be really hard to beat Kansas on a night in and night out basis. Unfortunately, Kansas basketball is not measured in moral victories and, oh, big picture, this is a good thing. It's measured in wins and losses. It is measured in a very high pressured environment, no pressure, no diamonds. And there certainly weren't any diamonds tonight in the loss against Houston. So those upcoming games, big, UCF and Baylor. Baylor looked a lot better today after they got upset in the midweek, but an opportunity to try to go 2-0 and bounce back a little bit if you're KU. The thing is, too, what made it interesting is there was a comment from Bill Self about KJ Adams that he gave to ESPN earlier today, and mentioned with KJ Adams coming back that they were kind of targeting the Baylor game. So it sounds like KJ won't be there for the UCF game, but the Baylor game going to be a big maybe. And I think that becomes even more interesting based on what happened in this game, right? Because you think about it, and AJ Storr struggles after playing well in the TCU game. So it's like, okay, when KJ comes back, I don't think AJ Storr is going to be eating into any of the minutes that KJ was having before he had the injury. But the question now becomes, can Rylan Griffen put together another good game? Can he have a strong game against UCF to where maybe he can eat a little bit into the minutes there? Can Flory Badunga continue to perform well? Like I said, I thought Flory was KU's best player today. I thought you could argue Juwan Roberts, but I think, to me, Flory Badunga was the best player overall on either side of the court tonight. And if he continues to play like that, like, I don't know, are you really going to come back and have KJ averaging 28, 29 minutes per game, which is what he was averaging before, and, you know, knock Flory back down to playing 15, 18 minutes per game? Do you even, like, if Flory has another really good performance against UCF, do you bring KJ off the bench against Baylor, right? At the very least, in his first game back, do you bring KJ off the bench to see what it at least looks like and figure he's coming back off injury, like maybe he's going to play less? In my eyes, like, Flory has played well enough, and this game included in that, to earn a starting spot in the lineup for KU. And I think the lineups with Flory and Hunter are really good. And I think the fact that, like, KJ would be coming back, to me, it makes it an even better situation to have KJ coming off the bench and to start Flory and Hunter, because the biggest concern when you're starting Flory next to Hunter is you don't have another big man behind them right now. And if one of them gets in foul trouble, what does that do for the rest of your lineup the rest of the game, right? But if you have KJ back, now you can start Flory and Hunter knowing that, okay, if one of them gets in foul trouble, we have KJ who can play the 4 or the 5 for you in these different situations. So I'll be very interested to see how KU kind of reintegrates KJ Adams back into the rotation. Does he go right back to starting? Does he go back to a big minutes load? Do we see other players take some of his minutes, both long-term and short-term? Is it just a lower minute load for KJ right off the bat, and then he gets backed up, ramped up? But we'll start finding out about that. It sounds like on Saturday against Baylor, barring any setbacks for KJ Adams. But we'll be back for you on Monday's episode. I do want to take a look at the 2025-2026 team and take a look at possible starting lineups and where that team could be good and bad. On Tuesday, we'll have a KU-UCF preview, and then we'll have a KU-UCF recap coming at you on Tuesday as well. But that'll do it for tonight's episode of Locked on Jayhawks. Sorry we couldn't have a party on this one, and boy, we were close to doing it. But yeah, just not clutch at the end there for KU. That'll do it for this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. See you next time with LOJ.